What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Interstate Mets Report. We are starting this stream off a little bit different because, as you all probably know through the grapevines, we have a great guest coming up on the Interstate Mets Report. So before we get into that and before we bring our guest up, make sure you all are tapping in with us. You know where to find us at Interstate Mets on X. You know where to find Nelson at and his YouTube channel. Subscribe to his channel. Big congrats on 300 plus subscribers, by the way. That is awesome to see. Nelson growing on YouTube, so follow him and subscribe to his channel. And you know where to find me at on YouTube as well, at CPNY Sports. All of our YouTube channels are going to be in the description below, even our guests. So make sure you're subscribing to all three channels. And like I said, Nelson, how are you doing today? And I'm excited for this because there's a lot to talk about. We got a lot to get into today. So how are you doing today, Nelson?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Just excited to have Anthony on the show, and yeah, down to
Absolutely.
talk some more.
Absolutely. We already got Yuki in the chat. What up, Yuki? Appreciate you tuning in. Subway in the house. That's right. And we got Tom checking in as well. Appreciate you making that commitment. I know you're on a different time zone, and hopefully this is a little bit friendlier for your time zone. So without further ado, let's get into some New York Mets baseball talk on Interstate Mets Report.
Welcome to the Interstate Mets Report with your hosts, Nelson and Chris.
All right. Let's go ahead and get right into it. We got Anthony from Subway To Shea making a guest appearance on the Interstate Mets Report. Anthony, how are you doing? Thank you for making some time for us today.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be on with you guys. We talked a little bit about this before we came on. This is the first time, I think, since Talking Mets with Rob did his panel earlier on last season. So it's an honor to speak with you guys and see your faces. I haven't been able to, mostly it's been through like tweets and stuff like that. So I appreciate you guys always. And you're always chiming in on my lives as well. So I appreciate that. And Nelson always gives me a nice little video in the morning to let me know that everything is going to be okay with the New York Mets. So I love listening to those in the morning.
Absolutely. We definitely appreciate you. Like I said, a lot of good collaboration within the Mets community. Ourselves till Mets do us part. We got Mets Weekly, Shea and Sons, all that good stuff. Talking Mets with Rob. This is one big community, and we love to collaborate with other content creators. And like I said before we get into it, I mentioned it before at the top of the show. All of our YouTube channels are in the description below. Anthony's is as well. And here's a little banner. Make sure you're subscribing to Anthony's YouTube at Subway To Shea. I believe you're right around 175. Get Anthony to 200 subscribers very fast and follow him on X as well. A lot of good content at Subway To Shea is all of his handles. Let me just give you a second to plug all your stuff and what you're doing on your channels and all your content that you got going on.
Yeah, so you pretty much have it right here for YouTube, at Subway To Shea, on X, Instagram. I even dabble in TikToks a little bit at Subway To Shea as well. And you can listen. If you can't watch, you can listen to the podcast. I usually, if the lives go long, like I did a really long one with Shea and Sons, I try to cut them down and have a little kind of best of thing. So I do that for Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So that's pretty much it with when it comes to all my content. So I appreciate you letting me plug it here.
Absolutely. And like I said, we got some people joining on the chat. This is being streamed anywhere that you can imagine. So if you're missing it, it's kind of hard to miss because we got it on all platforms. We got Jeff going to checking in here with us. We got Shane checking in with us here. We got John checking in with us. John, I always appreciate your tweets under my your responses under my tweets. It's always a good time conversating with you. We got Aaron checking in here as well. He's got 2 subs for me, and that's my sports. And we got Danny checking in with us as well. So like I said, keep hitting the live chat, keep commenting throughout this episode. We're going to get to the comments, get to a lot of the content that we have for you all today. We're going to be talking about everything. This Mets offseason. I'll be looking ahead at some of the starting pitching market, all that good stuff. We got a lot to talk about today. So let's get right into it, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and talk about some updates from around the league. We have some news that obviously me putting these graphics together that we missed yesterday or today with the Royals having a little bit of a field day signing some players early on this offseason. But you can see at the top here, the big acquisition for the Dodgers and Tyler Glasnow, Manuel Margot from the Rays. We'll just go from top to bottom. Anthony, we'll kind of do like a little roundtable here. Anthony, give your opinions, and then we can go on to Nelson. But what do you make of this trade of Tyler Glasnow to the Dodgers? And we saw today Jeff Passan breaking the news that there was an extension given, 5 years for about, I believe it was 120, 135 million, somewhere around there, somewhere in the ballpark of 27 million a year. So what do you make of this trade? And is this a little bit of a riskier trade for the Dodgers in your opinion? We'll get into some Mets talk later, I promise, but I just wanted to get everyone an update of what we've seen around the league so far.
Yeah, I think you have it in the chat too. Jeff Cohen, pitching getting very pricey. This is a guy who has all the potential in the world to be an ace, to be somewhat of a Cy Young, but he just can't stay healthy. So giving out an extension like this, 135 mil, I think it was that you said, for 5 years, it's a little worrisome for me because the guy hasn't pitched over 120 innings in his entire career. And that happened last season, 21 starts. The Mets wouldn't do a move like that. They couldn't right now. And I didn't want them to unless he was kind of like the last piece of the puzzle that they would have needed. But that it's too much of a risk for me to go in with Glasnow with what he has required for his extension and what the Dodgers are giving him. The Dodgers are all in, right? They got Ohtani, they have Tyler Glasnow now, and it seems like they're not done yet. They want to get Yamamoto, and they might want to be in with Josh Hader as well. So, more power to the Dodgers making these moves. They're a lot closer to the finish line than the Mets were. But as we know, as Met fans from 2021 and 2022, or 2022 and 2023, that everything on paper is all fine until you get on the field and see if you can get it done then. Because if you can't win the World Series, this is all for nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nelson, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a broken record because I do these videos every day saying the same thing. This doesn't bother me. Like, Tyler Glasnow is not a pitcher I ever wanted to see on the Mets. He can't stay healthy. We don't need guys like that on this team. We've dealt with it time and time again. It never works out. He just happens to be a younger pitcher that can't stay healthy. But that's the only difference. To me, that's too risky to throw away near $30 million. It might work out for him because the Dodgers are not the Mets, and the Mets always get the bad luck and whatnot. But and they gave up a pretty hefty haul for him as well. Margot is whatever. He's just a throw-in. He stinks. But Glasnow for what they got back. I mean, trading with the Rays is always risky to begin with. I don't know, man. I maybe there's people out there that wanted him. I'm not one of them. So more power to the Dodgers. I mean, yeah, if the Mets are going to compete, they're going to have to play these guys at some point. And if we do make it to the playoffs, more than likely the Dodgers are going to be on our way. But you know what? I'm perfectly fine with Tyler Glasnow being out in LA.
So I'm curious about that because I think ever since we've been doing these shows and we kind of started to realize that Tyler Glasnow was really going to be on the trade market with the Tampa Bay Rays, and he was sort of up for grabs. And given what the Mets needed, and we knew that they needed in the pitching rotation at the beginning of this offseason, I personally would have liked to seen the Mets. In hindsight, right? In hindsight, maybe if you're paying him $27 million for 5 years now, maybe not so much. But at first, I would have liked to seen the Mets at least have some initial talks in terms of pursuing Tyler Glasnow because of that upside. I know that we took a very different stance on that. Nelson wanted no part of them. He was very clear in that, and I sort of wanted the Mets to do their due diligence at the very least. So what was your stance on Tyler Glasnow and his market, Anthony? Did you want the Mets to take a flyer on him at least in terms of some trade talks, or did you want to stay clear away like Nelson?
I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, but yeah, I think I'm more in tune with what Nelson was saying. For me, it has to be that the Mets were that final piece. It would be Tyler Glasnow, and you would trade a couple prospects for that, but they're not. The Mets are just not in that position. Yes, our prospect rankings are better now, and we're one of the top teams when it comes to the prospect pool. but they're still not there yet, right? The pitching, we don't have enough pitching prospects ready to go for the Mets. And I don't know if I'm willing to just give up I'm not willing to give up a whole load of prospects for a rental that's, not even guaranteed to make it out every fifth day, that's still coming back from an injury, and that just not has had a enough innings in the bank. We need pitchers that are going to pitch innings. We saw it last year. We did not get anything from Scherzer, barely got stuff from Verlander, and that killed the rotation. And I can't put someone at the top of the rotation that already has that injury history. Well, you look at the Rangers now. They took the chance on DeGrom, right? And he got hurt, and he's out for the season. They took a chance on Scherzer, and now he's going to be out for half a season. The injury risks are always going to be there, and you just have to be worried with a guy like Glass now, even though he's a lot younger. And maybe, you know what? Maybe he does turn it around. Maybe he does become that ace for the Dodgers. The Mets aren't in a position to make that type of move just yet.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. Like I said, hindsight is always 2020 in terms of that sort of kind of a move. But realistically, given what the Dodgers are giving up and the extension that was part of the clause in terms of having the trade actually go through, in terms of needing to give Glasnow that extension to make the trade official, just didn't make too much sense if you're the New York Mets. So moving on here, we're going to kind of breeze through these real quick. The next three, all pitchers off the board. I was in tune with what you dropped on Subway to Shea in terms of some pitching options as a fallback plan in case Yamamoto did not materialize for the Mets. You see Lugo, a guy who I really was interested in bringing back. I called the 3 years, $45 million, $15 million a year. He goes to the Royals. Malley, and I've been clamoring for Malley for some time now. Understand that he had Tommy John back in May. Will be ready for the season. I think that's a steal of a deal for the Rangers. And then Jack Flaherty, I saw you put out a tweet saying you would have liked to seen him also in the back end of the Mets rotation, signs to the Tigers for 1 year, $14 million. What do you make of these pitchers that are slowly moving off the board? And I guess we'll talk about Yamamoto and the rest of the pitching market here in a second, but do you have any sort of, thoughts and assessments of these three moves back to back here?
Yeah, these are the guys that are going to go at the back end of certain rotations. Definitely, I would have taken a flyer on any of these three. Even bringing back Seth Lugo, as long as it was for the back end of that rotation, I would have had no problem the Mets going to Flaherty, like I said, or even Tyler Mahle, who's not going to start the season either. He's coming back halfway through. And then on top of that, you don't have it on here, but the Royals today signed Michael Wacha also to the rotation, another former Met. And, they're shoring up their end of the rotation. There always comes risks with those guys as well as the other ones on here. But for the Mets who, already have Luis Severino, I still feel like even if they were to sign Yamamoto, that they would need another pitcher as well, because Yamamoto is going to have to acclimate himself just the way Senga did. And that took about a half a season for him to, feel comfortable and get the juices flowing and be that elite pitcher that we saw Senga was towards the latter half. Possibly could have been a Cy Young Rookie of the Year. So even if you sign Yamamoto, there's still going to be a need for pitching. We just don't know who the Mets value. We saw that they valued Luis Severino, which was a guy that I did want to take a flyer on. I thought that he had a high upside, enough stuff to warrant the 1 year deal to be a back end rotation piece. Same would have been for these guys as well.
Absolutely. And Severino, you called it, Nelson, and props to you on our previous Interstate Mets report with our 2024 Mets projections. He actually called Severino to the Mets. So what do you think about the rest of these signings, Nelson, before we get into some actual Mets talk here with Yamamoto?
Yeah, I've been on board with maybe reuniting with Lugo. I also like Tyler Mahle. I think the problem is with Lugo, I'm speculating. I know it's a different regime, but Jeremy Hefner was here when Lugo was here. Sure. Jeremy Hefner had a say in Lugo staying in the bullpen when we all know he wanted to start. So there could have been a hesitancy there to come back here. I don't think he wants to end up in the pen again. So I don't blame him going to the Royals. It's a nice place. He definitely fits in that rotation nicely. Maile, again, this goes back to what Ant said with Glasnow. I don't think the Mets are in a position right now to sign a guy like that because we still have so many holes. We can't sign a guy that's not even going to pitch for maybe most of the year. So I get it. I get that why they wouldn't have gone there. I'm not a Flaherty guy. To me, what he did in Baltimore scared the crap out of me. He was not good once he got traded to Baltimore. It was ugly. Granted, it's the AL, it's the AL East. It's a little different beast, but still, wasn't a big Flaherty guy. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. I know that we got ways to go. We'll get into it with the Yamamoto talk and where we pivot if he doesn't sign here. But yeah, I mean, Lugo would have definitely been a nice add to the rotation, but it just seems the Mets are dead set on waiting for whatever it is Yamamoto decides to do before they move in whatever direction they choose to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can say that it's a risk, but if they're doing that, that means that they think that they're at least a little bit well positioned and better off than some of the other competitors in terms of those Yamamoto sweepstakes. Just to round out some more news around the league, a couple of relievers off the market. The Mets still need that eighth inning setup man, in my opinion, to go after in this bullpen market. We won't talk about it too much today, but you see Daniel Hudson returning to the Dodgers and Will Smith going to the Royals. And the big thing here, I think, with the Mets' interest in Young-Hoo Lee, obviously signing for above market price for what he was originally set at, coming from the KBO, 6 years, $113 million. I think that that's a very important sort of precursor to the Yamamoto signing in terms of that AAV that he got and those total $1 million that he got on that contract. So we'll talk about that here. And like I said, let's just get right into the Yamamoto talk. But before we get into it, actually, I want to shout out some people in the chat. We got B More, Iman in the chat here. Let's see. We got M Easy in the house. What up, M Easy? Kenneth joined, he said. We got Timothy in the chat as well. Keep dropping those comments. We're going to get to them. Tiger, Ali's in the chat. Mason's in the chat. What up, Mason? We got King in the chat as well, so I definitely appreciate that. Aaron says, who needs Glass now when we can have Imanaga? And like I said, Imanaga is a very good pivot point for the New York Mets. And even before the Mets wait for that Yamamoto decision, I believe Imanaga is definitely a pivot point that you talked to before and hit up his agents before Yamamoto signed. So let's get into the Yamamoto sweepstakes because they are ramping up. He is taking meetings with a lot of teams. Obviously, the Mets were one of the first teams to meet with Yamamoto in Japan. I think one of the only teams to actually go to Japan in recent weeks to go meet with Yamamoto. He has since come to the U.S. and held meetings with the Phillies. I believe it was yesterday. He's held meetings with the Dodgers and the Giants as well, and the Yankees, all of these teams you see on your screen. And I believe he does have meetings coming up with the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. So, like I said, this Yamamoto decision is going to come sometime before Christmas, I think the speculation is. So we're about maybe 8 or 9 days away or so until we get a firm confirmation of where Yamamoto is going to go. But there's been so many different reports on Yamamoto and his preferences, whether he's going to take the highest AAV, which presumably would come from Steve Cohen and the Mets if they're serious about him, or whether he's going to sign for a better fit and maybe more of a legacy sort of signing for those Yankees pinstripes or playing alongside Ohtani and the Dodgers. And I got to get your opinion on this and where you stand in terms of Yamamoto. Obviously, I think the collective Mets fan base, from what I've seen on X, is saying you got to be the highest bidders if you're the New York Mets. You got to secure him for the 8, 9, 10 million or 9, 10 year deal that he's presumably going to get. Are you in that same boat, or are you kind of weary about giving that sort of contract to a guy like Yamamoto?
No, absolutely. You have to. This is the only player you're doing this for. 25-year-old starting pitcher who has all the accolades possible in across the seas. And this is a guy, especially at 25, that I definitely want to give them as much as I can to. I am going to do my best to outbid every other team on here, whether, and if they're, if I'm Steve Cohen, I'm telling them whatever you're offered, you come back to me and you tell me what it is, and I will beat that. because if it's not about the money, right? If he's not about the money, you can offer as much money as possible. If he's not going to take it, at least you can say that, hey, we had the highest bid, we had the highest offer, and he just didn't want to take it. And it's not on the Mets then after that. We know in the past that there's been a lot of free agents that they wouldn't try to outbid for. And, it's hard with pitching, but this is a guy that you want to do this for. If the Dodgers are in on him, if the Yankees are in on him, you're talking about the Phillies, who are above the Mets in the standings, the San Francisco Giants, who have been craving for a top player to bring onto their team ever since the Aaron Judge situation didn't work out. And they reached out to Brandon Nimmo, and they tried getting all these players that didn't want to go over there. This is a guy that everyone wants, and it's for a reason. So, hey, you know what? Be the highest bidder. If he comes, great. If not, then, you know that you gave it your all in trying to get him over here. And the Mets have a lot to offer as well, not just the money. We're talking about, being on the same team with Kodai Senga, who I mentioned earlier was a guy that was able to acclimate himself not only to the big stage in New York, but it took a while, but he was able to become a pitcher in his rookie season that garnered a lot of rookie votes, and that quite possibly could have been a Cy Young. And you know what? I think should be a plot point for Cohen and for Stearns, working with Jeremy Hefner, who was able to get the best out of Senga. Those should be talking points, as well as, the Yankees saying, you know what, we'll give you the number 18, or you'll get to play with this guy, or, the Dodgers, you can play with Ohtani and be, in LA. This has got to be talking points for the Mets. And you look at the Dodgers, their pitchers haven't been able to stay healthy. That's something that you want to talk about when you're trying to get this guy to come over. This is a guy that is going to want the limelight. He's going to want to be on the top stage. You look at, if the Dodgers win, is it going to be Yamamoto's team? Clearly not, right? Because they have Ohtani, they have Freeman, they got Mookie Betts, so he'll probably fall in line to third or fourth on that list. You go to the Yankees and they have Garrett Cole as their ace, right? They got Soto and Judge. Those are going to be the top guys there. You come to the Mets, and this guy is going to be the ace of the rotation. So that's got to be something else that they even talk about with him when trying to bring him in here. I hope they get another meeting. I hope this is what they've talked about. And like I said, rounding it all about, I would offer him the most money, because you're either going to get him, or at least, you went in with the top offer and he declined because he doesn't want, the money is not the issue for him.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Like, that is perfectly well said. And that's something that I take issue with these reporters not fully sort of reporting on, right? You're going to be that top dog, and you're still going to be in that big market if you come to Queens with the New York Mets, where you won't have that if you're a Yankee or a Dodger. Now, the other thing that people seem to not know or not want to report on is the posting fee and how that affects the highest bid. It is a customary thing for guys, and this is why I brought up with Young Hoo Lee taking that high offer above market value for him. If the Mets blow it, another team's offer away, maybe 25, 30, $40 million more than what the next highest team is offering, that is going to directly go in terms of revenue back to the Orix Buffaloes, Yamamoto's former Japanese league team, right? So that is something that is very important as well. And they posted him pretty early. 25 years old is pretty early. We didn't see Ohtani get posted to MLB free agency that early. So this is something that is not usual for Japanese players coming over and being posted to the MLB. So that is something also to keep into account. We have around 35 people in the chat. Like I said, subscribe to all channels. Hit that thumbs up button. I definitely appreciate the support. Subscribe to Subway To Shea, Amherst Country Mets fan, and CPNY Sports. Nelson, what's your Yamamoto take in terms of this market and how the Mets are stacking up here?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I hate to parrot Anthony, but he basically nailed it right on the head. A point I really wanted to get across is, yeah, the Yankees and the Dodgers, they have the pedigree. They have that history that the Mets can't really argue with. Like, we're not going to match that. But if this is a guy that loves the limelight and he wants to be the star, he's not going to be the star on those teams. Shohei is the star in LA now. No matter what, Shohei's the guy. And they, like you said, Mookie and Freeman in it, but Shohei is the guy. So he's going to play second fiddle to Shohei no matter what. At the Yankees, Garrett Cole is the ace. He's not going to be the ace. Aaron Judge is there. They have Soto now. So they have other stars. The Mets, yeah, we got Pete and Lindor, but they're not at that level. Like, I don't think anybody really sees them at that superstar level. I really don't. And I think, like, he comes in here and he's the guy. Like, he's the ace. He's the star of the show. And if he really wants that, if that's important to him, then even the Phillies, like, they have Bryce Harper. He would play second fiddle to Bryce Harper. So to me, the Mets are the one place that could pay him, and he could come and be the number one guy if he really wants that. If he wants that on his shoulders, he wants to say, "Hey, look at me, I'm the top dog." Then Queens is the place to be, because I mean, we love Senga, but let's face it, he would take over that number one spot. So that to me is a great point. Like, that's something if I'm Stearns and Cohen, I'm trying to hammer home to this dude. If he's really about being that guy, if he wants all the light on him, you're not going to get it more than you are in Queens. So plus, if you take the Mets to the promised land and give this fan base a World Series, you would be immortalized like no other. Like, we know, I mean, I'm mid-30s. You're a little younger. I'm not sure how you are, but all we hear about is 1986 and the 86 Mets. It doesn't go away. Like, fans that live through that never shut up about it. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's just you get it hammered in your head. Like, even if I'm a baseball like historian, especially with the Mets, like, I read everything there is. I know, even though I was born in December of 86, like, I know everything there is to know about 86. But even if I didn't, Mets fans that were born then would not let me not hear about it. So if somehow, some way he would lead this team to a World Series, you might as well make room for a statue next to Tom Seaver now, because I'm pretty sure the guy would be immortalized pretty quickly. So yeah, to me, because of his age, his stature, and everything else, you can't really put a price point on that. Besides, anyways, the Dodgers proved you can give them all the money in the world and defer all the money you want, apparently. So if he's willing to do something, he probably won't do something that crazy, because obviously Ohtani makes a ton of money outside of baseball that he can afford to defer that. But if he's willing to defer a chunk of his contract too, then offer him whatever the hell he wants. Like, that's a game changer that I don't know. Fans seems to be scared of the Dodgers just being able to sign everybody now because of it. But why can't Steve Cohen use that to his advantage? Like, as long as MLB is letting it slide, you know damn well if we had done that before the Dodgers, everybody would be screaming and crying that.
There'd be a new rule already.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but now that the Dodgers were the ones that set the precedent, then might as well jump on it and do what you got to do. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with Yamamoto. I don't think that we're doomed if he doesn't sign, but I really hope we go all in and try our best and do have the highest offer out there. And I think we will, to be honest.
I think we will too. Absolutely. John's tapping in. Appreciate it. Check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Just reached 500 subscribers. Shout out to them. Huge feat. Definitely deserve that. So John and Ibby, shout out you guys for supporting us all the time too. So Yamamoto's the perfect player at the perfect time for the Mets. The Mets have one thing they can flex over anyone else, including Los Angeles and the New York Yankees. Just pay more. Absolutely. So, and I know it's hard to put a dollar value on it, especially with John saying, just pay more than the next team, which Steve Cohen has all the ability to do. But let's try to sort of put a dollar value on it, right? Tom's saying that apparently Carlos Baerga yesterday, whether you want to take what he says with a grain of salt or not, I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on his reporting, but He claims that the Yankees have already made the baseline offer of the parameter of 9 years for $304 million for Yamamoto. I'm wary that the Yankees would even go up to 300, but if they do, more power to them. $304 million is certainly beatable if you're Steve Cohen, but how beatable is that? Like, where are you guys willing to go? Obviously, it depends on what the Yankees offer. It depends on what the Dodgers offer. You obviously have to match that, but if you're the New York Mets and you can't match the Dodgers' win now situation, if you can't match the prestiginess of playing in Yankee Stadium in those pinstripes, you have to persuade him with money. And how much more money is it going to take to persuade him? Whatever the Dodgers offer, maybe plus 30 million, plus 40 million, plus 50 million. Nobody knows, but how far are you gentlemen willing to go in terms of that dollar value? And it could help maybe giving him an extra year, 10 years, 11 years, who knows? There is a lot of speculation that this could be a signing with him being 25 years old. That's 10, 11 plus years in the making in this contract. So how far are you really willing to go for Yoshinobu Yamamoto? And I'm going to start with you.
The money doesn't really bother me. The years, I don't like this long kind of a deal for a pitcher, man. My tops was always like, 4 or 5 years, but I know we're going to have to go over for him anyway. But if that's the price point, let's say that, the Dodgers and the Yankees both came in at around 304, 305. We're looking at the Mets probably having to go to at least, 308, 310, maybe 315 to convince him to come over. It's going to take a lot. And like you mentioned about the posting fee, isn't that like, I don't know the exact terms, but is that like 50 million or something, like, or 25? I don't know what the posting fee number is, but I know it's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah. So, and then also not only the posting fee, but you also have whatever Yamamoto ends up making. You have the hierarchy system where 25 million, a percentage of the first 25 million goes to the Oryx Buffaloes, and then they make a percentage on the 50 million, and then so on and so forth. So like, we're talking about a lot of money that's going to be going back to the Oryx Buffaloes. And presumably there is some sort of understanding when they posted Yamamoto that is going to be like, he should be looking out for their best interest too. Like, it's not all, like, I'm not saying that's all going to be all of his decision, but that does play a fact. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, yeah, I don't know exactly what the posting fee is. I got to go back and double check that, but that percentage is something.
If he makes over 300 million, you're looking at about 50 million at a posting fee. So it could even be a little higher than that. So
this contract,
yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
This contract has the potential, if it's over 300, we could be talking about in total 350, 375, quite possibly reaching 400 in total with the posting fee. That if it reaches to that 300-ish frame, it'll probably be over. If the Yankees are doing 5 or 306 or something, 304. Yeah, then you're talking about the Mets would have to go 310, 315. You throw 50 mil on top of that. Yeah, we're looking at quite possibly 375, 400 in total for a pitcher who has not even played in the United States yet. You give the 700 million to Ohtani, you know what you're getting because he's played in the major leagues and he's pitched and hit well. We don't know what we're gonna get in Yamamoto, but it's a risk that I think the Mets kind of have to take. I think this is a guy that everyone is in on, especially the top teams. You're definitely going to have to make that risk for this guy over, say, like the Tyler Glasnows of the world, or even a Blake Snell. I would not, risk that. It's just going to be money that the Mets are giving up. It's going to be Steve Cohen's money, obviously, but instead of a guy like Blake Snell who has a draft pick attached to him, which kind of hurts him coming to the Mets. This is a guy that has all the upside in the world, could possibly be the best pitcher in baseball in a year or two. So we'll see what happens, but the Mets definitely have to be all in. Like they're totally focused. We can see on him because there's been no other signings at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay chiming in here. Yamamoto becomes a starter version of Diaz. What will the trumpet be? Absolutely. Like that's one thing you definitely have to consider. MEZ saying 350 million. Absolutely. And I think I definitely agree with you 100%. I think 350 million, when it's all said and done, when he's closer to making his decision, it's going to be closer to 350. Hell, maybe even 400. We don't even know. It's going to be absolutely insane.
Isn't it crazy that we started off the
At
offseason with
200.
him making $200 million, and we
Absolutely.
have gone all the way up to now 350, quite possibly it being 400 in total, all thanks to the Ohtani deal.
Absolutely. It's funny how baseball free agency works, and I know a lot of people complain about it, but that's just the nature of the business, and that's what happens when you don't have a salary cap. And I'm not a proponent for that whatsoever, but I'm just saying by the nature of the business, you will see these contracts eventually graduate, and it's no telling how far it'll go. Henry says 10 for 350 mil, absolutely a possibility. Jeff is saying some type of graduating percentage as the posting fee, 100%. Matt checking us out. Till Mets do us part. Shout out Matt. What a good looking crew. We definitely appreciate that. Shout out Matt. And then Stevie Mack saying he can totally see Cohen putting his nuts on the table and going right into 10 years for 400 milli. So I don't know, man. This is insane to me to put into perspective how much these teams are willing to go for a guy who hasn't stepped on an MLB diamond just yet. But at the end of the day, scarcity is what presents the highest value, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about here. So let's talk about some pivoting points in the free agent market if you're the New York Mets, and if you want to kind of bypass a Yamamoto decision to sort of lock somebody up to fill one of those presumably two openings in the rotation before Yamamoto makes his decision, or if you just miss out on Yamamoto completely. As you can tell, his name is crossed out, not taking into consideration Yamamoto, who you pivot to here. First and foremost, I've been very adamant about being wary of Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell on a long-term deal. I understand they're going to want 6 to 7 years given their age and given their success. Let's call it success, right? Over the past couple of seasons, but I know a lot of people are first and foremost wary on Blake Snell. He does have 2 Cy Youngs under his belt, but the inconsistency is also there. And Jordan Montgomery, he is a third guy in the rotation type starter to me. He's not one of those guys, like you can slot him in right behind Senga, but for the AAV that he's going to want over those presumed 6 to 7 years makes me a little wary. A guy like Shota Imanaga is a guy that makes complete sense. You're looking at a Kodai Senga type deal, potentially 5 years with an opt-out somewhere in between, maybe for about $75-80 million, with that being the market. Somewhere around Eduardo Rodriguez and what he got with the Diamondbacks, which was 4 for 80. So, Nelson, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who do you pivot to here? You see those tier C guys there at the bottom with Lorenzen and Giolito. Obviously, that's really is what it is. That's a very last ditch effort there. And then Marcus Stroman, we all know, burned his bridges with the Mets, but he is one of the top options on the market right now, drawing some interest with Kansas City. So let me know what you think.
I was gonna say, I hope you were joking putting Marcus Stroman on this list, because no way in hell that's ever.
I had to do it.
No,
I had to do it.
You didn't. You did not have to put Marcus Stroman on this list. He just doesn't belong there. He's okay as a starter, but no way in hell he's ever coming back to the Mets. It's just not a fit. I have been adamant I want no part of Blake Snell. I think he's going to get a contract that's not even close to what he's worth. He's outside of those 2 Cy Young seasons. He's just not been that great. He's not been a guy that's worth the amount of money he's getting. He's also not a guy that gives you a lot of innings. He's been a little more durable than the Glass now, but he hasn't thrown 200 innings. Like, he's not that kind of pitcher. Montgomery's a little more stable. I'm weary of the money he's going to get too, but if you don't get Yamamoto, you need somebody at the top end of the rotation. And to me, at that point, he's the only guy left. And let's face it, the market for pitching has gone so far out the window that it's like, I guess money's money. I'm like you. I'd rather keep the years lower. Same with Yamamoto. Like, if I can not give him 11, 12 years and have to pay him more money. I'd rather that than than give him more and more years. I'd hate doing that with pitchers. They're just not reliable enough. But if it's going to take 6 or 7 years to get Montgomery and that's all we got left, then I guess we're kind of stuck. Unless, I mean, Stearns is smart. Maybe he can pull off a trade. Maybe he can say, you know what? I don't like Montgomery. I don't like Snell at the price they're going to be. Give me an Imanaga. Give me maybe a Giolito, a Lorenzen at the back end, and I'll go find me a top end of the rotation pitcher on a trade market. It's possible. I mean, it's not impossible for that to be his game plan. Honestly, if I had to, if Montgomery gets offers that are too crazy, that would be my strategy. I love Imanaga is my one guy that no matter what I want. If Yamamoto's not in the picture, even if he is, we got Yamamoto and Imanaga, that'd be sweet. But Imanaga is the one guy I really love from this list. I know he's not a sure thing. I know he's more of a middle of the rotation guy, but if he's truly getting like a Senga type deal, I think he's more worth it than most of these guys. Lorenzen, I don't think he's getting crazy money. He'd be a nice guy to have at the back end. Whether he's a starter or reliever is kind of questionable. He has started recently, but he's also come out of the pen. Giolito, he's a guy, he had a rough end of the last year. I don't love him, but if you're telling me he's a back end guy again, we have to fill this rotation out somehow. Like, so we right now we have scraps and we need to figure it out. But yeah, Imanaga is my one guy on this list that I really like. Everybody else is whatever. I mean, Snell, I don't want. Montgomery at the right price, I'd take if we miss on Yamamoto. I don't see a world where we get Yamamoto and Montgomery. I've seen that floated around. Like, to me, that's a bit of a stretch, especially if Yamamoto is getting the kind of money we're talking about. At some point, Cohen has to have a limit somewhere. So that's where I'm at with it. But yeah, can we is there? I wish there was a way to like cross out Marcus Stroman. I don't like to look at his name.
Yeah, I mean, the Stroman situation is what it is. I mean, he's going to get a deal somewhere. He opted out of the Cubs contract. We all know that. But you talked about trades here. Henry makes a decent point here about trading for Yelich and Peralta, those two contracts for the Brewers. It could work. I don't know how much business the Brewers are going to want to do with the Mets so far. So, obviously, a lot of people speculating with the Burns Stearns connection. He is a free agent. We'll talk about the 2025 free agent class as one of the last topics for this stream here. But yeah, we got about 45 people in the chat, floating in between 45 to 50. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to all the channels in the description. Subscribe to these gentlemen right here by my side, and subscribe to my channel as well. Make sure you go ahead and do that. And let us know about the pivot points here, because obviously we know that Nelson wants no parts of Marcus Stroman. We hear that loud and clear. What's your strategy? Because I honestly don't think Imanaga takes Yamamoto out of the question if you go get him first, but I don't think that it's feasible to get Yamamoto and Montgomery both. What do you think?
Yeah, I just posted a video about an hour before we went on the air about a plan B in case Yamamoto does not come to the Mets. Marcus Stroman was not on that list. And look, Marcus Stroman has all the talent in the world. We've seen it. I just feel like social media wise, he wasn't able to handle New York for some reason, although he put up this front that he could handle New York. It just didn't seem that way. And for that reason, I think that they do not, go back to the well on that one. I am very much in favor of a Shota Imanaga for sure. I feel like you definitely need two guys on this list if you are not getting Yamamoto. I think Imanaga could be had for a similar contract that we got Senga with. He's 30 years old. So is Senga. So I think that could work out. You have another lefty in the rotation. I'm all for more lefties in the rotation, and it'd be nice to have two to go along with Quintana. And I think if you can get an Imanaga and you can throw in one of the two of the Lorenzens, Giolito, I tend to go more with Giolito in that position. Then I think that would work for the Mets. We've seen teams with not the greatest rotations somehow make it to a postseason berth, and it can work. But if this pitching lab, the so-called pitching lab that we have, along with Jeremy Hefner, can fix the wrongs of a Lucas Giolito and a Luis Severino, then that's more power to them. Giolito and Severino were very high-end pitchers with the most upside. And, Giolito is a guy that I think most Met fans wanted a year or two ago. So if he can get back to what he was back then, I think that's a great move for the Mets. Jordan Montgomery is on the top of my list because he's pitched in New York, and he's shown that he could pitch in the postseason. Problem is he wants a Rodon type deal, 6 years, $162 million. And like I said before, I'm a 4 or 5 year kind of guy when it comes to starting pitchers. I don't know if because you pivot from Yamamoto that then you go and offer a Blake Snell or a Jordan Montgomery the money that they want, which I think Snell's going to get somewhere around close to $200 million. I wouldn't touch that with having to give up a prospect, knowing how he finished in the draft rankings this year, which I know no Met fan was happy about. I would rather go in on a Jordan Montgomery, but like you said, CP, that, he is going to be that, second, third, fourth type of starter. So you're definitely going to have to add someone else. And I don't know. I would take the chance on Imanaga and Giolito and definitely, round the well and see what happens with Montgomery. Definitely inquire what he's looking for and seeing if maybe you can bring the years down and give him a little more AV, kind of like what they did with Verlander and Scherzer, but not too much money. I wouldn't go too crazy with the Jordan Montgomery. I feel like him and Snell can be trap contracts that we will regret 2 or 3 years down the line. And I don't want to be trapped again like we were with Verlander. Scherzer I wanted, but Verlander I felt like was going to come up and be a trap contract, and it did halfway through the season. So I would go Imanaga, Giolito, and inquire on Montgomery and see what he would want.
Bingo. That is exactly how I would echo my sentiments, because we'll talk about this. So like this situation in terms of pivot points, if you don't get Yamamoto, is interesting because it has a profound impact on your chances of landing a top pitching free agent in 2025. You don't want to cuff yourself in terms of the payroll with a Jordan Montgomery for 25 plus million AAV and Blake Snell, the same thing. And them having to sort of pay that over the course of the next 6-7 years and miss out on a guy like Corbin Burns in the next free agency. Presumably he's going to hit free agency without getting an extension. We'll talk about that all, but this is what I've said to people watching my True Mets Talk podcast videos. I've been saying that this offseason for the Mets is a merry-go-round, and it doesn't, like, what you do this offseason has a profound impact on the free agents that you're going to be able to get next offseason and the roster spots that you're going to be able to sort of give out next offseason. So like I said, there's a lot more at stake here. And I know people don't like to use the word bridge year for 2024, and because they think that you're not going to be competitive if you use that term. But there's a lot more things at play here, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Anthony, did you have anything on that?
On the bridge year.
On the bridge year.
Yeah. So, I think that Nelson echoed this in one of his Great Morning videos about, paying attention. And I've said this too, paying attention to what Cohen, to what even Epler before he was let go, and what Stearns has said during the general manager meetings and the winter meetings on their strategy. And they've kind of been following it all this whole entire time. This will probably, like they said, be that, bridge year where, if they can find a way with these pieces that they're bringing in and these depth pieces, if they can make them work and this team turns into a winning team, wonderful. If they can somehow make it into a playoff spot like the Diamondbacks did, even better. If it doesn't work, I think they are okay with that because they're holding on to their prospects and they're trying to build some sort of winning recipe And it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. This team has been so, I don't know, stringed up and hasn't been able to build with the Wilpons. And they've had to kind of gut that and do this rebuild. And it hasn't been an easy rebuild because they've went through three or four general managers, 3 or 4 managers, and no president of baseball operations. So now they finally have the president of baseball operations in place. He's only been on the job for a month and a half. He has no general manager. And, he's on with a rookie manager now. So there's going to be a lot of building that this team has to do. If they can get a guy like Yamamoto, it probably, brings them a little bit closer to where they want to be. But they still want to see what they have in these prospects. Stearns still has to review all the players that he has because he's only been on the job for a month and a half, and it's going to take time. So I understand the whole point about this year being a bridge because, Cohen said it during the press conference during the trade deadline. He said he wasn't going to spend like he did last season. And I do believe that. I do believe that there are specific cases, for example, Yamamoto is a specific case that they'll go out and try to spend for. But besides that, you're not going to, go crazy and give Blake Snell a $250 million contract just because he came off a Cy Young. You're not going to give Jordan Montgomery over $175 million because he pitched well in the postseason. That's something that the Wilpons would have done years ago, and that would have been the big free agent get. I think there's going to be a more measured and a smarter way that this team does business, and we are going to see Stearns bring what he's learned and what he's done from Milwaukee to New York. It's not just him coming to New York and now he has all this money to spend. He's going to do things the way he did it in Milwaukee, sprinkle in a little spending here and there because Cohen is going to want a high price free agent or something like that, and see if this team can build a sustainable winner. And we're going to see that start this offseason. So I have no judgment on Stearns. I'd like to see a year out of him before I can, judge how he's done. And the same goes for how Cohen handles free agency as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this comment right here echoes exactly what you just said. Almost like we have to take this team seriously from the point that Stearns showed up to properly judge the Cohen era.
Exactly.
Up until now, when Cohen owned this team, or when he began to he purchased this team, we saw spend without really a sort of plan for the future, right? So now we're dialing back on the spending, being more methodical. And I know that Mets fans don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear it. And I completely understand that. Like, I get that it takes patience. It takes time. It takes looking at this team and this organization through an objective lens, but it needs to happen to get this team back on track. And then when you properly assess this organization, if you're Stearns, then you can start to manipulate the pieces that you have at play. Not only Cohen's money, but this rejuvenated and revamped farm system, etc., of how you're going to methodically build a contending team. And that cannot happen in the span of 3 months in this offseason alone. So absolutely agree with you. Let's see here. We got Mets Talk with Hayden here. Subscribe to his channel if you haven't done so already as well. In the Mets Roundtable, LFGM, very hard to be positive right now, but hopefully their time will come. Absolutely. John says Imanaga and Giolito, but you'll need a 6-man rotation if that happens, presumably with the likes of Imanaga coming onto the rotation. Jay checking in with us as well. Rotation of Yamamoto, Senga, and Imanaga would be difficult to manage with the days off, but I'm all here for it. Absolutely. It's something that you can definitely work with 100%. So let's go ahead and get on into, we talked a little bit about the pitching here. We talked a little bit about the news around the league in terms of who's off the board versus who's still available. Let's talk about who's still available from the bat perspective and the offensive market. Given that we know that Mauricio is not going to be on the diamond for the Mets in 2024 with his ACL injury, unfortunate news. Prayers up to Ronnie Mauricio. Hopefully he comes back rejuvenated, ready for 2025. We haven't really seen the free agent market sort of materialize and sort of develop from the bat perspective. You still have, unless you really wanted Hunter Renfroe, who the Royals just locked up today, then you still have all of your options that we've been talking about from the beginning of the season, right? Down the list here. And the Mets have made I guess, somewhat of offensive utility additions so far, if you want to call Joey Wendell and Jose Iglesias and Trace Thompson offensive upgrades or additions, which I certainly don't. I think they're just pure depth pieces to sort of float between the majors and the minors in case there's injuries that happen. But here are your top free agents still available. A lot of people speculating what they're going to do in the outfield spot. A lot of people speculating if McNeil, with this Mauricio injury, is still going to be the everyday second baseman for the New York Mets, or if they hold on to him, if he's going to move to that left field spot. So presumably, if he does stick at second base, you have left field still needed to be addressed, and you have the DH spot needed to still be addressed desperately. Nelson, starting with you here, names that intrigue you. Run me down the list here, and then we can go about it from there, because the offensive side of the perspective of the ball here for the Mets, we haven't heard anything about. And we haven't really heard anything about the Mets from the Mets perspective outside of Yamamoto at all. That's why I like this offseason so far, in terms of the Mets are keeping everything quiet. I'm just waiting for them to wow us with some big move out of nowhere. So, Nelson, let me hear what you have to say about this free agent class, and even about the loss of Ronnie Mauricio.
Yeah. First, I want to touch on the point of the bridge year thing, because I think a problem with Mets fans is like that's like some kind of like third rail word that they hear bridge year and just automatically like think, oh, that means we're not going to spend any money, and that means we're just going to suck, and that means Luis Severino is the prize of the offseason, because they see that we haven't done anything yet, and it's not just Mets fans. I said it in a video. It's fans in general of most teams. Just you want it now. You don't like to wait. Patience is not anybody's virtue. But like you said, this regime has shown, and really since Cohen took over, there's been a little. Last summer, there was some stuff that started to leak. But besides that, everything's been very hush-hush. We hardly ever know where this team is going. Obviously we know they want Yamamoto, but outside of that, like these moves just come out of nowhere with this regime. And Stern seems like a very quiet guy. He isn't going to give his plans up. So to that end, like we don't know what all he said was he has a plan for if Yamamoto signs. He has a plan for if he doesn't sign. I don't view this as a Yamamoto doesn't sign, that's it, we're packing up and going home and we're done. I do think you can have that bridge year and still compete. You just need to sign the right guys, and I think Stearns is smart enough to do that. To that end, we do need, at this point, with Mauricio's injury, to me, Mauricio was a second baseman. I know they were planning on throwing him at third, or at least trying it out. To me, he was the second base option, which then allowed you to put McNeil in left if you wanted to, or what have you. Now that takes that off the table. Now, more than likely, you're playing McNeil at second base. So you need an outfielder. So, I mean, we don't have a left fielder. Like, you're going to give Trace Thompson the starting job, DJ Stewart. If we do that, I got a problem with that, because that's not good enough. DJ Stewart had one nice month. Like he doesn't belong to starting 9 every day. Trace Thompson, he has little upside, but not much. He doesn't belong. He's not a starter. Even Michael A. Taylor, who we've been attached to, he's not a starter in my opinion. So we need to find a starting outfielder, whether that be in a trade, whether that be one of these guys. Teoscar Hernandez is my preference if we're going outfielder. I don't mind Gurriel either. With third base, listen, I'm all for giving Beatty a shot. They are going to give Beatty a shot. I like the idea of signing Justin Turner because he can be that DH, but then also be kind of a backup option for if things don't work out with Beatty. If you have to play Turner at third, then he can figure out. I mean, DH can be figured. It's not ideal, but DH can be figured out. You can throw Vientos in there. You can give guys days off and rotate. There's other options for DH. Do I see us signing a left fielder and a DH? Probably not. I think we're going to focus more on the pitching side because, let's face it, our pitching isn't good. And I've said that all along. I thought we would invest more on pitching than bats. Now we're kind of in a point where we have to at least get an outfielder. I think, like, to me, I don't know about you guys, but to me, we don't have a left field option, so we need a left fielder. Like I said though, Justin Turner, if you're not going to get a left fielder, or if you're going to go like a low end guy, I mean, let's face it, Mark Canha wasn't necessarily a starting outfielder either. We started him most nights, but he wasn't. So if you're going to sign like a Michael A. Taylor to battle it out and rotate things that way, and then you do get like a Turner who can DH or play third base, I guess I could see that. We'll see. There's options, obviously trade options as well. But yeah, my favorite names on this list are Teoscar. I like Justin Turner. I'm not in love with Soler, but you could talk me into that. Don't want any part of Matt Chapman, not even a little bit, especially with the qualifying offer attached. Same with Cody Bellinger. I don't think he's a fit anyway. Rhys Hoskins was interesting to me, but I just he's like Matt Chapman's biggest fan, and I don't get it. Rhys Hoskins was interesting to me, but I guess I don't. With the way things have shaken out with Mauricio, I don't know if that's going to be a fit right now. But I wouldn't mind him either. I just feel like we're gonna go more heavy on pitching. Given that we have guys in the pipeline on the offensive side, more guys than we do pitchers, I think Stearns might be a little more patient on the offensive side and see if he can maybe strike with like a 1 or 2 year deal and on some of these guys. But to me, I think he wants to leave those options open with the offense. So I see us more, if we're going to spend on pitching. We're going to try to maybe do a sneaky move with the offense and go from there.
Yeah, and one name you didn't see on this list is Michael A. Taylor, one of the only names that the Mets have directly been linked to as well. So he is not there. But and what do you think? Who do you like on this list? And we haven't even talked about what Henry's talking about here in terms of internal options at DH with Vientos and Stewart. So I know that's not the popular option, but what do you think?
To answer that question first, I'm not 100% sold on DJ Stewart. He had a really great two weeks, but then you saw him kind of fall back off to what we're used to seeing from him from the rest of the season. So as a fourth outfielder, fine, which he's not really a great outfielder either. I'm okay with that. Vientos obviously probably should get an opportunity. He kind of started to hit towards the end of the season. I'm definitely not opposed to this from Henry. I just if they can do better, I would like to see them try. Of the available free agents, another name that's not on here, and the Mets talked a lot about run prevention, but a Kevin Kiermaier for the outfield is someone that I would look at, whereas they can get him to play the outfield. He'll provide minimal offense, but, probably better than a lot of the other options that are, available, not the power guys. But if you were to get him and then get a DH in the terms of a Jorge Soler, who's probably more primed to be a DH than he is an outfielder, I'm okay with that. If you want the combination of both, obviously you're going to go after Teoscar Hernandez, who can play outfield and he does hit, but he does strike out a lot. That's a definite concern. Rhys Hoskins has grown on me as of late, and I wouldn't mind seeing him at the DH position. I think you got to bring Justin Turner home. I think that's the big move for me offensively. The guy hasn't really lost a beat at 39 years old, hitting wise. And that's with the caveat that you're not playing him all the time. If you can, and that's what they did in Boston. They didn't play him every game. He played about 100, a little over 100 games, maybe about 120. And he hit pretty well, over 20 home runs and 90 RBIs. I would have took that in a heartbeat last season over what we saw from Daniel Vogelbach. So Turner is definitely a guy that I'm interested in, and maybe obviously he doesn't play great defense anymore at third base, but maybe he can groom Brett Baty into what we need him to be. Maybe he's that veteran presence that a Brett Baty needs. And I'm with Nelson. I never thought of Mauricio as a third baseman. I thought him very well as a second baseman. He showed me a lot of promise there. You put him there in between, Alonso, who could play a decent first, and we know what Lindor is, and having that tandem where Lindor can work with Mauricio, I think helps Mauricio out in the end. So even with him playing healthy, I thought that he was more of a second baseman than he was a third baseman.
Yeah, I mean, I'm third on that list, was right there with you guys. I was projecting him to be a second baseman with the way that the situation in the infield kind of worked itself out. I could never see the Mets not playing Brett Baty and not giving him that true chance to prove himself or prove that he's not going to be in the Mets uniform for future years. Like, you have to play him to understand what he fully has. I completely agree with you. And this sort of DH talk with the Mets, when you talk about it, this is a great point here. Justin Turner can still swing the bat very well, but he's almost 40. You give him a 1-year deal, and that keeps your flexibility options open for next season, which I think the whole consensus here is that if they don't pivot to a Jordan Montgomery in the pitching side for the same reason, to keep flexibility in future years, future off seasons, that's the same thing they're going to do from the offensive side of perspective. Like Teoscar Hernandez, I would love, but he's going to command at least a 3-year deal.
Yeah, him and Soler. The problem with those two guys is you give them the 3 or 4 year deal, and I'm, having deja vu and PTSD of Starling Marte and one of those guys getting injured, and that's a concern. That is a concern for me. Jorge Soler, great offensive bat, and he would be perfect to put right behind Pete Alonso, but he can't play outfield. And I would like the DH to be a little bit versatile in the fact that they can play the field. And Hernandez, who plays defense, he just strikes out a lot. That's it's a little worrisome.
Yeah, 31.5K percentage for Teoscar Hernandez. That is a lot. Soler's around 25. But like I said, I completely agree with that analysis. Very wary about giving those guys 3 or 4 year deals. That's why I like guys like Justin Turner, JD Martinez that will take 1-year deals. Even a guy like Rhys Hoskins coming off a major knee injury probably will take a 1-year prove-it deal if I had to speculate. Maybe a 2-year with a player opt-out. If he kills it in 2024, he can go back and hit the market. So Tom's asking if we'd re-sign Escobar on a 1-year deal at third base. No, because I really do think that with Brett Baty's lack of sample size, he hasn't even played a full 162 in the major league so far for the Mets over the course of the last, 1.5 seasons. So you got to give him that chance. So I'm going to say no, unless any one of you all are taking a different stance. Okay, that's what I thought.
Been there, done that. And I love Eduardo Escobar. I literally have like one of his sayings as a poster from Athlete Logos in my room, but nice guy and all, but I think him staying on that team last year from the start, where Brett Baty was killing it in spring training and should have got the starting job, I think that stopped Baty's momentum and carried on throughout the season. I think that messed with him mentally.
Definitely could have. I definitely agree with you. So we'll see what happens this season with Brett Baty. All eyes are on Brett Baty, especially if they weren't before. They are now with Ronnie Mauricio going down. Absolutely. Aaron makes a great point here. Jock Peterson's a guy that I've wanted the Mets to at least kick tires on. His power also is something that enamors me. Can play the outfield, not great, but does fill an outfield position. So like I said, I don't think it's realistic, but like I said, that power is something that you can definitely play with as well. So Cody Bellinger is going to get a bag. It's not going to be from the Mets. A lot of teams Blue Jays are primarily in on Cody Bellinger from what I've heard. I mean, given what Jung-Hoo Lee got, you got to think Cody Bellinger is going to get upwards of 150, maybe 175 range. If Boras has his best interest at heart, then $200 million is not off the table for Cody Bellinger as well, depending on the amount of years that someone's going to overpay for him too. So this comment too, because I've been sick of this topic here, but someone commented it and we might as well just talk about it briefly before we get into the next slide and get out of here. Where was it here? It was about Mr. Pete Alonso. Why are the Mets playing around with Mr. Pete Alonso and his contract extension? Quick analysis, gentlemen. Does Pete get the extension in your guys' mind this offseason or not? And you start.
I think they definitely should give him the contract extension to appease Met fans. If they don't get Yamamoto, I think it would be wise to lighten up those contract talks. I always thought that they were going to sign him this offseason and avoid, if this guy has a killer year, you kind of put yourself in a bad hole because now you're going to have to spend even more money. So it would be wise for the Mets to do this. Now you can evaluate everybody else, but we all know what we're getting in Pete Alonso. Give him the deal and get that done this offseason so you don't have to worry. I always thought that they were waiting because they wanted to see if they were going to be players in Ohtani this offseason. That's why I thought that they weren't going to give Pete the money and see if they can do both, if they are just going to do Ohtani. But since Ohtani didn't want to come here, and Pete's a guy that wants to be in New York. We saw he had that shirt on. Was it New York or nowhere? He's very ingrained in everything that happens in New York. He's got his foundation that he does here too. I think he does comedy shows with the Fan, or when Craig Carton was around, they were doing comedy shows in New York. So Pete's a very important part of this team and this roster. And I've always said it, that instead of trying to trade Pete or thinking of letting Pete go, this is a guy that you build around and get protection around. So I'm all for Pete getting the extension. I don't think it's that they're playing around with him and messing around. I think it's the fact that now, this Yamamoto contract is very serious and is going to take a lot of time to put together. Look at how long it took for Ohtani, and that was $700 million. And there's all this deferment and all these, if the owner leaves, he can leave. There's going to be a lot of stuff put into this contract if we get a Yamamoto. And I'm pretty sure the same thing will be handled when we eventually, hopefully, sign Pete Alonso.
Absolutely. I'm definitely in that boat as well. And I hope the chat heard exactly what you just said in terms of being pissed off that Ohtani was never really a serious option for the Mets. He didn't want to come here. That is absolutely a fact. And we don't want anybody on this team that doesn't want to play here. So just hope everyone realizes that at home. Nelson, what do you think on Pete Alonso before we get into the next slide here?
I originally thought we'd get an extension done. I could still see it happening maybe towards spring training, them figuring it out. But right now, let's face it, the focus is Yamamoto. They're not going to work on this while they're still waiting on Yamamoto. It's going to be a complicated deal, like Anthony said. The Dodgers did set a precedent here where these deals are going to get weirder and weirder, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. After that, whether they sign Yamamoto or not, then maybe they can circle back to Pete. But for now, it's Yamamoto's their sole focus. You can tell they're not doing anything else. And I know people are annoyed with that, and some people are like, you know what, screw it, let's move on. But you can't move on a guy like that. You can't go and sign a Montgomery and whoever else, and then potentially lose out on a Yamamoto because you pivoted away. I just don't think that's smart necessarily. I get the frustration. Nothing's happening. Everybody wants something to happen. Got to be a little patient, guys. His deadline's January 4th, so it's going to happen here sooner than later. I still think it's going to happen before Christmas, like most people do. And then we'll see with Pete. I hope they get it done because, like Ant said too, if Yamamoto doesn't happen, this fan base is going to be irate. There's not, at least the irrational part of the fan base is a lot louder than the rational side. So it's just going to be nonstop. X is going to be on fire. And maybe if they can get Pete's contract done, that'll settle people down a little bit. But yeah, I hope they get it done. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff makes a great point here. Can't replace 40 plus home runs, 120 plus RBIs with Pete. I mean, you can, but not efficiently because you'll have to do it across two different players because there's not many people who get you this in one player right here with Pete Alonso like Pete Alonso does. So last slide here before we get out of here. We got a couple more minutes left on the stream. Since we're talking about bridge years in 2024 versus 2025, we might as well just take a very, very, very early look ahead of some 2025 free agents that will be on the market when we assess, because I think it's important to do so when you're assessing why the Mets might be a little bit quiet this offseason, right? And if they don't end up getting those names that everybody wants, right, besides maybe Yamamoto, I think that is the surefire option that everyone will be okay with to spend for this offseason. But everybody else, there's payroll flexibility that you need to take into account here, right? So it's important to look at 2025 and some free agents that will come on the board here. You see the offensive guys here on your screen. Juan Soto, presumably, if he doesn't get the extension, which does worry me about him potentially not being serious about actually hitting free agency. If he has a down year, just like Pete Alonso, like you said, if Pete Alonso has a great year, he gets more money. If Juan Soto has a down year, does that impact his potential to get $400+ million? You never know. You know, like Boris could just be saying that just to say that. Who knows? Bregman, if he doesn't get his extension, will hit the market. Jose Altuve, Santander, Adames, so on and so forth. You see the guys in blue are New York Mets as of right now. They'll be hitting the open market as well. So, Anthony, any names on this list? You know, you look at the pictures here: Bieber, Burns, Walker Buehler, Michael Soroka, who is now a White Sox, going over from the Braves. Anything that stands out here to you when we're assessing how the Mets are going about this free agency versus being flexible? Because a lot of people think that this rotation needs to be filled this year. It needs to be filled this year. Well, you have a rotation. You need to obviously fill the rotation with whoever you're going to fill in with it, right? Whether it's Yamamoto, Imanaga, Giolito, whoever. But you also have two free agents that have or they're going to present themselves in 2025 being Severino, Quintana down at the bottom. They're going to walk. And then you're going to have to automatically, by default, spend money on the pitching rotation next year as well. So you cannot handcuff yourself, like we said earlier in the stream. So how do you go about this? What is your overall take and assessment on this list right
yeah, there is no reason why Corbin Burns should not be at the top of the Mets wish list next year when it comes to pitching. People have been wanting to trade for him this season, and I don't think that's going to happen. Like you mentioned before, I don't think that relationship with Milwaukee is too great right now to make a trade. But Corbin Burns, pitching wise, is probably my number one target. Obviously, I want to bring Pete Alonso back. And as I know, Juan Soto is going to hit free agency, especially after seeing what Ohtani got. I just don't know if he's going to leave the Bronx. I think they might. I think they might try their best to re-sign them, especially if they don't get Yamamoto. I think that Juan Soto might be re-signed at some point by the Yankees. Anthony Santander is another guy. I talked about this with the Shea and Sons podcast. They were very high on him, and that's a guy that I would definitely be interested in for the outfield. I don't think we're going to have the perfect kind of outfield this season, but if you could bring in an Anthony Santander, who's got a great bat, that's definitely some guy I would look into. The rest of the guys, I don't know if I'm really into. Christian Walker, he plays first. No, he doesn't play. Does he play first base? Right?
First base for the Diamond. Yep.
For the Diamondbacks. Okay, I almost got him and Goldschmidt mixed up, but Goldschmidt is in St. Louis. Christian Walker could probably be a backup option if you don't get Pete Alonso. I don't want Conforto. That's another guy, been there, done that. I was never a big fan of Conforto. Anyway, and for pitching, yeah, Corbin Burns is the guy. I don't know if Shane Bieber, Buehler. If Buehler was healthy, I would probably take a flyer on that, but the rest of the guys really don't do it for me.
Sure, absolutely. And you mentioned Goldschmidt just by default here. I know he's 36 years old, but he also will be a free agent next offseason as well. So another name to keep an eye out on. You have Christian Walker and Paul Goldschmidt. Just in case Pete Alonso somehow doesn't get re-signed, which I know that everybody on this panel right now wants Pete Alonso signed, but you have those two names floating out there as well next offseason. Nelson, your initial takes when you see this list right here.
The one thing that I will agree with, I guess, the pitchfork carrying crew of Mets X is that a point they continue to make, and it's kind of valid. So you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if these guys are going to hit free agency for sure. You don't know if some of these guys are going to get traded and end up with a team that wants to keep them. So this list could end up dwindled depending on contract extensions and all those other reasons I said. So you have to, while you're right, and leave yourself open and not hamstring yourself with Montgomery deal or Snell deal, you still have to build the roster enough that you're not solely relying on all these guys being free agents next year. So, I mean, if I look at the list, obviously Juan Soto is going to be, if he does hit free agency, a top target. I truly do think he's going to hit. I've said it. I do think he's going to go to free agency. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I do think if that's the case, the Mets have a pretty good shot just because the dude loves to hit at Citi Field. I mean, yeah, it's at Yankee Stadium's one thing, but he's played at Citi. He's always been lights out at Citi. He's comfortable at Citi Field. So that could be a very big factor in what he chooses to do. And obviously, Cohen does have the biggest pockets of everybody. Bregman I like, but I feel like our infield is going to be – you're going to see some of these kids in the infield. And I don't know if we're really going to be paying money to infielders or big money to infielders. So I kind of take Bregman and Altuve out. I love Anthony Santander. I love that dude. Like, if the Orioles were to make him available on a trade market because they're not willing to pay him, please be in on that guy. He's a guy I really like a lot. Adames, Tyler O'Neill, a dude with potential. He has power. I wouldn't hate that move at all. Josh Bell is whatever. He did have a pretty good year last year. Christian Walker's pretty good, but hopefully we sign Pete Conforto. Been there, done that. Like Ant said, I don't really feel that. As far as the pitching's concerned, listen, Bieber has had his issues. His fastball velocity has been going down. It's a little scary. Freaking Buehler can't stay healthy. When he is healthy, he's phenomenal. But again, do you want to run the risk of giving a big contract to a pitcher that can't stay on the field? Corbin Burns, for the right deal, I would definitely be in on. He's another guy that he's trending down a little bit, which scares me. But he's the most consistent out of everybody on this list. Soroka, I don't love. And then Severino and Quintana, I think this will be the last year we see them as Mets. Although, I mean, who knows if you get Severino in that pitching lab and you can figure him out, and he likes being here with his boy Mendoza, and maybe you work out an extension there. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's super early to talk 2025 guys, but I do get your point. I just do see like that point of like, we don't know if these guys are even going to be necessarily available. So you got to bridge that and manage that very carefully.
I will say this about that list. If this list is going like this comes to fruition and all these guys are free agents, the Mets need to do whatever they can this offseason to make themselves attracted for next offseason. Otherwise, we're in the same spot now where we're having to spend over $350 for a pitcher who's never pitched in the major leagues. I mean, like, we're going to the ends of the earth to get Yamamoto here on a team that, even with Yamamoto, is probably not a playoff team. So they are going to have to do whatever they can, win as many games as they can to make themselves attractive enough to get guys outside of Pete Alonso to come back. And, you know, Pete Alonso could leave himself because he doesn't want to be here anymore at some point. He gets tired of the team losing. So the Mets have to definitely put together a team this offseason that's attractive enough for next offseason as well.
One more.
Yeah, that's a great point. Go ahead.
Our kids' development is going to make a big difference too. Like, do we see Acuna at some point this year? And if we do, does he show that he has what it takes to like actually be a star in this league? Jet Williams is flying up the prospect levels. Like, do we maybe see him at the end of the year? Drew Gilbert, another guy. If he's as good as he's looked, you could potentially have 3 guys there. It's not likely because we all know how things work out with Mets prospects, but you could potentially have 3 guys there that fill 3 holes on your roster, and then you don't have to worry so much about free agency. Let's face it. And that would be great because we need at some point to be able to not have to spend so much money on these guys. So that's also going to be, and you never know. You could have a random. I mean, we do have some pitching too that we don't talk about enough. Christian Scott, I absolutely love. More, I know Vassal's name comes up more because he's closer, but I love Christian Scott. I do think he's going to be the best pitcher out of all our minor league pitchers right now. We could see him. We could see a random name. Jacob deGrom. Nobody knew Jacob deGrom. I'm not saying we have a Jacob deGrom in the minors, but nobody knew Jacob deGrom was going to be Jacob deGrom. So things like that can happen too. McNeil, Nimmo, those guys. Well, Nimmo a little more, but McNeil, nobody expected him to be an everyday starter for our team. Like he wasn't a top prospect. So you never know what's going to happen this year. That's why I think Stearns wants to evaluate these dudes and wants to leave himself options. So we'll see. I really don't think we're in as bad a shape as some people will lead you to believe. Like it's going to work out.
Yeah, I agree with you. Great points by both of you gentlemen in terms of using this year to establish that foothold, like you said, Anthony. And then for you, Nelson, like these prospects coming up, you can't forget about them. You can't depend on them. And if there's a situation to get a star player, you definitely pull the trigger in terms of trading whatever mix you want, but you still have that backup option. And like, I don't think anyone's mentioned the payroll. You got Verlander, I believe, coming off the books, his money. Scherzer's money is coming off the books. The rest of McCann's contract is coming off the books. The free agents that you see on here, presumably, minus maybe a Pete Alonso extension, is coming off the books. So a lot of flexibility in terms of the payroll resetting starting in 2025. Guys, that's really all I had. I appreciate everyone tuning into the stream. I know we ran a little bit over, 15 minutes over. We usually try to keep it between an hour 15. I definitely appreciate it. We had to go a little over with special guest Anthony from Subway To Shea in the house. I definitely appreciate it. Anthony, we're gonna plug your channel here again, but just some final closing remarks out of you for the viewers at home, just about your channel and about this Mets team.
No, I gotta, I think we just have to keep it even keel. I think, like I've repeatedly said, make sure first off you're watching Nelson's morning videos because they kind of put everything in perspective, and Met fans should understand. Take what Cohen and Stearns and what Epler has said. Make sure that you're all paying attention to that because they have a strategy and that's what it's been about. So I'm going into this season at peace and as even keel as possible. If they get Yamamoto, they get him. If not, they'll pivot and we'll figure out a way to get this done. And hopefully it ends up that this Met team, the hopes is they can make it to the postseason, but if they could get a winning record and somehow get into the postseason, even better. But don't go crazy with expectations, but just, be patient. I know that's a tough word, especially in Queens, is being patient, but this is the year to do it because we have a new regime taking over and there's a lot of evaluation and a lot that has to go through. With the podcast, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Subway To Shea. The podcast is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You know where to find me on YouTube. And I hope to have some good stuff coming. I'm working with this weekend with SNY New York Post on a short that should be out at some time, either Sunday or next week. So just stay tuned on that.
Awesome. Yeah, get Anthony to 200 subscribers on YouTube. All the great stuff that he does on his podcast. Love tuning in there. Some great stuff. If you're sick and tired of hearing our voices here on the Interstate Mets Report, make sure you go check out Subway To Shea. A lot of good collabs. Nelson, what you got for us?
Not too much. I want to thank Anthony for coming on. Really appreciate it. One of the brightest Mets fans that I follow, and I love your page. Love your stuff. So please subscribe to his channel. Listen to his podcast. He does a great job. I personally like the Mets fans that are just kind of even keel and aren't losing it all the time. So Anthony fits that bill for me. So yeah, thanks you everybody for watching. It's been a great stream, lots of comments. Appreciate everybody. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, if you would, I'd greatly appreciate that. We're trying to grow and grow bigger and bigger. And hopefully one day we'll be on SNY or something, who knows. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Thanks CP for kind of taking the charge on this one. And yeah, hopefully next week we're sitting here talking about Yamamoto being a New York Met. That would be a nice Christmas present and birthday present.
Absolutely. We are working for the next stream next Friday. I'll be out of town, out of commission starting tomorrow through Wednesday, but we should be back next Friday with another rendition of the Interstate Mets Report, and we will have one, maybe both of the Shane Sons boys. Hopefully they can make it on the next episode of the Interstate Mets Report. But like I said, you know where to find all of us. All of our YouTubes are down in the description below. Make sure you go check us out. We had about 25 to 50 people in the chat at any given time today. So make sure you're hitting that thumbs up and supporting all of our podcasts. I certainly appreciate it. Shout out everybody in the chat commenting as well. Jay says, good show, guys. Tom says, great show. Thanks, guys. Jeff says, good chat, boys. Ricardo says, thank you, guys. Good job. We got a lot of support, and we couldn't do this without you all. So shout out the chat, everybody supporting. With that being said, this has been another episode of Interstate Mets Report
next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, this has been CP. We got our boy here from Subway To Shea. We got Anthony from Subway To Shea, and we got Amish Country Mets fan Nelson. I appreciate it. Great chat, and let's go Mets. We'll keep an eye on any news. We'll see you all next week. Peace.
Thank you for watching the Interstate Mets Report. Streaming Tuesdays at 5 p.m. and Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to @Amish Country Mets Fan and